Chapter 1861 transformed into a rat. Changwon, who originally suspected that Jang E was up to something, had to admit that they did keep their promise. If this is a game of three kingdoms, then what can make people believe in his sincerity more than putting his own general in the hands of others? After hearing Changwon's words, Morana and others breathed a sigh of relief. Very good, this time we have a sure win. Saladin spoke up and gave a different opinion. Don't be happy too soon. There is another possibility. He is playing both sides. He also joined King Arthur's team and pretended to show it to us. Morana shook his head. No way. If they really do that, we will destroy the statues in their city. And if he really joined King Arthur's side, he could just crush us with his absolute strength. There's no need to do this. Morana turned around and looked at everyone. According to our original plan, we will set off immediately to the city where King Arthur's team is. After making sure that the Chaos team has engaged them, enter the field to end the battle. I will be in charge of guarding the main camp. Changwon's voice came from the other side. What about the Chaos team city? Do we need to have anyone here? If they make any unusual moves, just destroy their statues. Saladin shook his head. This is indeed the best choice. But you have to know that King Arthur's team has a total of 6 members. Chaos team has only 2 people, and these people are the only ones who are strictly fighting. The abilities of the other 3 are very limited in a head-on battle. If we want to win this battle, we must at least send 1 person over. 8 people against 6 people, plus 2-handed soldiers, can form an absolute advantage. To fight a tough battle, one must have an absolute advantage in terms of military strength. Morana defends the home because her ability can freeze an area and stop movement, delaying long enough for friendly forces to return to defend. After arranging the tactics, Morana guarded the city wall. 1,000 red-armored soldiers were left to her for defense. The others led the remaining 3,000-odd soldiers and marched towards the agreed area. Jang E led more than 1,000 soldiers and set out on the agreed route. There was news here, so of course they informed King Arthur in advance. The 2 armies met in a huge canyon, surrounded by huge rock pillars formed by erosion. King Arthur arrived with his men, and a large number of soldiers deployed in the canyon with great momentum. Even though they are just emotionless fighting machines created by the managers, their fighting ability is very strong. They are built according to the standard of 1,000 soldiers killing 1 trial taker. Among the people who came, the one who was responsible for defending the city was Pokong. Jang E remembered that his cage ability was a very powerful space-related ability. At that time, he actually blocked Jang Yi's space travel. His ability is indeed very suitable for defense. The 3 people who came were King Arthur, Olive, Ichigal, the mysterious man in black robe, and Odin, the Nordic god king. A man stood on a tall rock pillar, looking coldly at Jang E and others. Everyone is here. It seems that they have completely given up on their own future. Odin said coldly. Olive looked towards King Arthur, who was the one who facilitated this alliance. What should we do next? Do we take action? King Arthur looked at Jang E from afar, and their eyes met in midair. They understood each other, without saying much. Let's fight, as we said before. Suddenly, the eyes of the Black Army soldiers in the canyon burst into strong murderous intent. Shouts of killing rose to the sky. They held a variety of weapons in their hands and rushed towards the enemy in front of them. Odin stood on the rock pillar, riding on an 8-winged Pegasus, and raised his right hand towards the sky. In an instant, the sky above his head was covered with dark clouds and thunder rumbled. Boom, boom. A bolt of lightning suddenly struck the earth from the sky, and then condensed into a lightning gun that flashed with unstable light in Odin's right hand. Gungnir, the eternal spear. Once the target is locked, it will chase after it forever before it is completely destroyed. The lightning spear flew out from Odin's palm and shot towards Jang E in the distance. Jang E coldly watched the lightning spear approaching at a high speed. The Sunluo Wanxiang barrier had already protected everyone inside it. Laugh. The lightning spear silently penetrated into Jang Yi's alien space. The power of thunder raged in the alien space, but it was just this level, and it was not enough to destroy Jang E's dimensional door. Odin narrowed his eyes. Although he was just acting, he did not use his full strength. But this shot at least contained all of his strength, but it was perfectly blocked by Jang E, which really frightened him. If I really become an opponent with this guy, I must think of a way to break through his space defense. Odin made up his mind. Brian walked to Jang E's right side, with his 2 hind paws on the ground and his 2 front paws stretched forward. Super heavy pressure. As soon as it finished speaking, the thousands of black warriors rushing forward were suddenly hit by a heavy hammer. Boom! Their bodies and the ground beneath their feet suddenly fell towards the ground. Brian's ability is field. In this large-scale war, he alone can suppress thousands of troops. At this moment, King Arthur's holy sword was drawn out of its scabbard, and he slashed at them through the air. Let's do it together. They realized that Zhang Yi's Sinluo Wanxiang defense was amazing, and it would be difficult to break it by one person alone, so they decided to attack together. Each of these people is a top-notch warrior in the world. Even Zhang Yi would find it difficult to stop them if they joined forces. At the critical moment, the metal box behind Lu Ren opened, and the snow owl regained its shape and quickly wrapped around her body. With a sharp sound of breaking through the air, the snowy owl descended on the battlefield. The silver-gray mecha exudes a mechanical beauty throughout its body and is not inferior to the mechanical demon mecha. Today, the snowy owl is even more powerful than when it first set foot on the Fremon's battlefield. Because Lu Ran himself has now reached the Ypsilon realm. She combined the materials and technology of the demon god's body to comprehensively upgrade and transform the snow owl. Lu Ran, codenamed Lu Ban. She was famous in Huaxiu Elementary School, but was only known to a few people as the mechanic for chaos. But on the international stage, almost no one knows she exists. Therefore, in this battle, the other 2 teams did not take her too seriously. They forgot that Lu Ren also relied on himself and the mecha to fight his way out of the crowd and defeated 2 powerful enemies in a row to advance to this level. Facing the joint attack of the enemies, Lu Ren calmly stretched out his snowy owl arm. Defense force field. An invisible barrier formed in front of the few people. King Arthur, Odin, and Olive joined forces to attack the barrier fiercely, but it only made the barrier shake and the energy dimmed a little, but it did not break it. When Yichigel saw the scene, his pupils suddenly contracted. This is my tribe's technology. Yes, this is indeed the body defense field technology of the Tsang Jiyuan race. Even the modules were directly disassembled from the demon body and installed on the snow owl. No wonder Yichigel is so familiar. Crack, crack, crack. A series of sounds rang out, and hundreds of firing holes on the snowy owl opened at the same time. One after another, red laser cannons bloomed like a light show, and then indiscriminately cut towards the enemies in front. King Arthur and others dodged and blocked. Many people's eyes fell on Yichigel intentionally or unintentionally, which made Yichigel clench his fists. He didn't expect that humans with backward civilization could master their technology in such a short time. I underestimated your race. Yichigel's voice came through the mask, and soon his voice turned cold. But it's ridiculous to be proud of just this. As he spoke, he raised the huge red sword in his hand. A vast power emanated from the sword, and then it stabbed straight at the snowy owl. The form is a sword, and to the Tsongyuan people who have already turned their weapons into energy, it is no different from a gun or cannon. Energy burst out from the sword, hitting the defense field in the form of a shock wave. In an instant, Lu Ran's defensive force field was pierced. Fortunately, Zhang Yi blocked it from behind, so Lu Ran was not hurt by this move. That was a close call. That guy is the king of the mechanical race, and he really knows how to break the defense field. Lu Ran patted his chest and said with a look of relief, "Be careful." Zhang Yi focused his eyes on the entire battlefield. If we encounter these guys in the outside world, each of them will be terrifying. Even if our strength is limited, we must be extremely careful when facing them. The battle escalated rapidly, and the soldiers of both sides were already fighting fiercely. The showdown between different people is also in full swing. 30 kilometers away from here, a shadow suddenly emerged from the ground and gradually turned into a human form. Saladin, dressed in a black robe, stood on a tall rock pillar, observing the battlefield from a distance through a smart device. He didn't dare get too close, otherwise he might be affected by the war. And now, he still feels that Jang E's team's actions are somewhat suspicious, so he decided to wait and see for a while. They will enter the field again after Jang E's team and King Arthur's team have fought to the last minute and have exhausted all their opposing forces. However, the timing of entry is very important. If they arrived too late, King Arthur's team would have already used their strength advantage to kill all members of Jang E's team, and they could have returned to the city to rest. By then, it will be much more difficult to defeat them. From a distance, energy fluctuations in that direction can be detected through smart devices. The desolate and empty Gobi Desert, dozens of kilometers away, actually did not seem far away. The incoming shock waves triggered a storm, blowing the black holy robe on Saladin. 10 minutes passed. 20 minutes. The sounds of fighting on the battlefield gradually subsided, and the energy fluctuations also weakened. Saladin and others gathered here, and they chose to get closer. At this time, the entire canyon was filled with blood. Many soldiers from both sides died in the battle, and some aliens from both sides also died in the fierce duel. Odin's body was hung high on the rock pillar, with a sharp sword piercing his chest and nailing him to the rock pillar. Olib, King Arthur, and others were also covered in blood and looked extremely miserable. But in the end they still defeated their opponents with their real advantage. Jang E had collapsed on the ground, surrounded by everyone in the center. Brian was lying on all fours, and it was very difficult for him to stand up. As for Lu Karen and Yang Xinshin, they were no longer visible at this time, because they had been eliminated. King Arthur raised the sword in his hand, pointed it at Jang E's head, and said coldly, "I'll deal with you first, and then I'll kill Morana and the others. This war is finally over." Jang E smiled disdainfully, but said this to Morana and others through the smart device. "We have done what we can do. Regardless of success or failure, don't forget to agree on the reward." At this moment, the wind suddenly blew in the canyon. Everyone subconsciously turned their heads and looked in the other direction. There, murderous intent is boiling. Saladin, Chang Wan, and others led more than 30,000 red-armored warriors to the battlefield. "Let's do it." A huge shadow moved rapidly from the sky, like a huge black cloud. Saladin showed his ghost form and opened his mouth to make a sound like thunder, which was to tell Jang E and Brian to start fighting back. At the same time, black shadows fell from the sky in his body like dumplings. The black shadows were a sticky substance, which swelled up quickly after falling to the ground and turned into human shapes. Saladin's Shadow Demon Legion also appeared in front of everyone. Jang E and Brian looked at each other, and meaningful smiles appeared in their eyes. Boom! In the sky, thunderclouds and storms surged. Saladin opened his huge mouth, and terrifying thunders bombarded King Arthur's team like sharp swords. Alexei also raised the two thunder axes in his hands and let out a war roar. Oh! He raised his head and roared like a giant ape, and thunder from the sky fell on his body, wrapping him completely like a thunder god's bathrobe. The crackling thunder made his body swell a little, and the whole person looked taller and more burly. Even his clothes were burst. Those two arms, which were thicker than an adult's legs, tightly grasped the thunder axe and rushed towards King Arthur. After the Tyrant ability is activated, he becomes a most violent war machine. The battle axe was raised high, and then it was chopped forward fiercely. A ray of lightning split open and rushed towards King Arthur and others like a volcanic eruption. King Arthur also had a meaningful smile on his face. Finally took the bait. "Let's do it." These words were probably said to Jang E and others. On the rock pillar, Odin, who was originally nailed to death, suddenly pulled out the sword from his chest. It turned out that the sword had only passed through his armpit and was tucked under his arm. He descended from the sky, condensed the eternal spear in his hand, and then threw a spear towards Boom! The eternal spear fell like a meteor, and the moment it touched the surface, it turned directly into a huge wall of thunder on the surface. Alexei's attack was directly blocked by the wall, and the red-armored soldiers who charged forward collided with the wall of thunder and were directly burned by the high-intensity electric current. Black smoke rose up into the sky, and dozens of red-armored soldiers were killed on the spot. The war has begun. However, everyone was waiting for Jang E and the others to take action. Only in this way could they form a huge numerical advantage. Everyone is here, right? The corners of Jang E's mouth curled up slightly, and the body under him suddenly split open. Liu Karen, pretending to be dead in battle, flew out of the snow owl mech. At this time, Yang Xinshin was also inside the mech. Seeing this scene, Alexei and others were shocked, while King Arthur and others laughed wildly. Oh no! We've been deceived. Saladin immediately realized that something was wrong, because just a moment after the fight, he discovered that King Arthur and others were not damaged at all. In other words, the cruel battlefield that they had just seen was simply fake. They were fooled by Jang E, and Jang E defected to the other side. A feeling of being deceived and humiliated surged over them, and Saladin was filled with incomparable anger. Chaos, have you lost even the basic dignity of a strong man? His roar came from the sky, like thunder. There was also a subtle flash of contempt in King Arthur's mouth. Breaking one's promise was indeed a despicable act. But fortunately, Jang E finally chose to stand on their side. Admit defeat. You have lost this battle after all. King Arthur raised the sword in his hand and said to Jang E and others behind him, "Now, let's end this battle as soon as possible." The battlefield is shaped like a sandwich. Jang E and his 4 companions were at the innermost, King Arthur and his 5 companions were in the middle, and the 4 companions of Saladin's team were at the outermost. But now if Jang E joins forces with King Arthur, there will be 4 of them. The difference in the number of people in the upper and lower ranks was almost no surprise. So King Arthur and the others turned their backs to Jang E and his companions, believing that the outcome of this battle was already decided. Good. Jang E agreed softly. Then he raised the divine chain in his hand. Liu Keenan also opened the laser cannon launch port on his arm, and Yang Xinshin summoned the fallen angel puppet. But it was Brian who finally started the battle. It raised its claws and pressed down hard. Super heavy pressure. With it as the center, a huge invisible field instantly spread out in all directions. King Arthur and others only felt as if their bodies weighed 10,000 pounds and fell down in an instant. And at this moment, Jang E's murmurs rang in their ears. Star Cannon. Holding the gun with both hands, the Shumlian rifle is between a sniper rifle and an ordinary pistol, and its shape is similar to the ancient flintlock rifle. However, the dark energy that burst out from the thick gun barrel made people feel cold all over. Jang E pointed 2 guns, one at King Arthur and the other at Ichigal, the king of the mechanical civilization. Energy gushed out from the muzzle of the gun, instantly penetrating the space and reaching behind them. King Arthur and the others did not completely trust Jang E, but the current situation made them feel that victory was just around the corner, so they inevitably relaxed their vigilance. Moreover, no matter how hard they thought, they could not figure out what reason Jang E had to stab them in the back. If one can even abandon one's own city, doesn't that mean one has completely given up on the ultimate victory? So when the attack came from behind them, everyone showed expressions of shock, panic, and extreme anger. It wasn't just them who were shocked, but also Saladin and others who were extremely angry and terrified. Boom! Boom! Jang Ichuan fired 2 shots that instantly reached behind King Arthur and Ichigal. King Arthur was furious. He turned around with all his strength and slashed fiercely with the sword in his hand. Excalibur! He roared, and the holy sword exploded with great power, but he turned around and counterattacked in a hurry, so he had no time to use his best fighting posture to resist. The moment the sword was swung backhand, the nuclear bomb, mixed with strong void power, had already reached in front of him. Boom! The dark light collided with the white light, but his speed was half a beat slower after all, and the next moment, he was completely enveloped by the dark light. Ichigo was not having a good time either, but his reaction speed was much faster than King Arthur, because he is armed with the most advanced technology. Although Jang E's attack was unexpected, he was able to block it with his backhanded red sword, but he was still in a mess and was knocked away. At the same time, Lu Karen and Yang Xinshin also came behind Alabu and the mysterious man in black robe. Unfortunately, Yang Xinshin's attack missed. Lu Karen's laser cannon hit the mysterious man in black robe, causing a corner of his black robe to break, revealing the claws underneath. Jang E took a look and a mischievous smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. I knew it was you. Are you still pretending? God, under Neon Country? Among the three pillar gods, the god Shankari has been killed by, so who are you? After hearing what Jang E said, the mysterious man in black robe finally stopped hiding. He lifted up his black robe, revealing his true form. As expected, it had the same body shape as the sun god of the god's nest. It didn't look like a lizard man nor a human. Instead, it looked more like some kind of evolved rodent, with a long mouth, a short tail behind it, and drooping skin and flesh. This is the so-called God clan under Neon Country, the Rat Clan. You finally found me, a human ghost. A gloomy and sad voice came from his mouth. He stared at Jang E with uncontrollable murderous intent in his eyes. I'll tell you my name, Gao Huangchan Sun God. You can also be Gao Huangchan Ray God. Calling himself a god, Jang E could almost conclude that he was indeed the being worshipped as a god in Japan. This is not surprising because Japan believes in Shintoism, everything can be a god, and Japan has always had the saying of 8 million gods. If we put it in ancient times when the population was smaller, there were more so-called gods than people.